Hey, everybody, it's Dr. Eric Balcabbage. We're back for another edition of Thyroid Answers podcast, and we have a special guest today, Dr. Joesph Antoun. He is the CEO of L-Nutra and a pioneer in longevity and health. So we're going to have a long discussion with him about kind of dieting, fasting, time-restricted eating. We're going to talk about the impact it has on health and our physiology and our longevity. So this is going to be one that you might need to go back and listen to a second time. And it definitely relates to everything we talk about on the podcast on a regular basis and the things that I talk about, even in my new book, The Thyroid Debacle. So Dr. Antoun, welcome to the Thyroid Answers podcast. How are you doing today?
Fantastic. And thanks for hosting me. Hopefully we're going to change somebody's life today. That's my goal of every podcast.
I think every day you have the opportunity to change somebody's life, right? So we think little drops of water create the tidal wave, right? So all these little pieces, these little nuggets that people can get can start to help them move in the right direction. So first of all, let's talk about you. Who are you? What makes you expert in fasting, time-restricted eating, and this longevity space?
Yeah, so I started my career as an allopathic doctor. So I'm an MD, PhD, and was a man of science and man of wanted to really help patients live a healthy, long life. This is why I went to med school, and this is why and I have two other masters that I was a big nerd of uncovering what makes people sick and how can we cure diseases. That was my passion in life. And then when I was doing my rotations in medical school, and I wanted to be a cardiologist, and I was trained, in the best schools, the Harvards, the Hopkins of the world. And but doing my rotations, I was facing two major challenges. I felt that every time I'm meeting somebody, I'm meeting them after they're sick. Mm-hmm. And I had two solutions only in my pocket. Either I put you in a subscription of medicine for the rest of your life, or I send you to surgery. Mm-hmm. This is all what I had as a physician. My entire IQ, EQ, everything that I've learned in my life, my entire potential was I meet you after you're sick, and I put you on one of these two tracks. In the disease that are killing 90% of us, cardiovascular, diabetes, cancer, and Alzheimer's, none of them had a solution in a pill. And the pill was, you have to take it every day. One pill as a cardiologist, it would be one pill for blood pressure, one pill for blood cholesterol, one pill for blood sugar, and then one pill for your, the clots or anticoagulant. And you had to take them every day of your life. My biggest question at that time was, if this works, why you have to refill your prescription every month? That was my biggest question. I had zero doctor at Harvard and Hopkins that was able to answer that simple question. And even worse, the day you skip your blood pressure pill, the day you skip your blood glucose pill, and the same day you have high blood pressure and high blood glucose. Mm-hmm. This is how ineffective. Now, God bless medicine. It helps when there's no other way, but we only focused on that, and we never focused on the other way. And I then left and wanted to look for this other way. And so not knowing what to do at that time, I was like, maybe I study health policy and public health, and I tried to reform healthcare system. I want to be an advocate to change healthcare system, to meet people when they're healthy, to take care of them when they're healthy and keep them healthier rather than meeting them after they're sick and be a little bit helpless by just giving them a pill every day, which we keep adding and adding and adding with time. So I studied public health and health policy and started a career where I was advising a lot of ministries of health on changing healthcare systems. And I was so proud of that. How can we do more prevention? How can we keep people healthier longer? And I had two walls there. Wall number one is there's no market for prevention. You tell people to eat healthy, everyone knows that already. You tell them to not smoke, everyone knows that already. You tell them to exercise, everyone knows that already. So either you do it or not. And why people don't do it? Because we've built a system where it's easier to do the unhealthy choice rather than it's easier to do the healthy choice, right? So we made the burger cheaper than a lettuce and then a good salad. We made the counter before you check out at Target is full of chocolate, is not full of, apples. And it's not easy to go down your building or your house and run. You have to go and find a gym and pay for it. We made the healthy choice difficult and expensive. So you got to change the financial structure and urban planning to support that, and that's not easy. The second hurdle, when you don't have products in prevention, you just have set as recommendation. There's no investment, there's no policy, there's no reimbursement. So there wasn't a product that represents prevention or that there's no pill of prevention at that time. This is what I was looking for. It's like, is there anything we can do as a product? It's easy to consume versus incentivize and change structure and education, all of that. And this is when I decided to go and join the biotech industry to learn how to discover technology in healthcare. And I joined Lilly and I became head of international business development. And I was on a journey to learn how you discover a product in healthcare, how you launch it globally, while seeking for a true preventive technology in healthcare.
So I'd like to add one more problem to your list that you didn't cover, and that's number 3. Is what is, or how do we define, or how do we measure health?
Yes.
Everybody throws this around like you got to be healthier. We want to optimize health.
I have an answer. And the answer is coming.
I love it. So tell me what the answer is.
The answer is coming in the next phase. So then I went to seek a product that keep us healthier longer, right? I met the CEO of the Buck Institute for Research on Aging. It's the biggest aging research institute in the world. It's in San Francisco. It's called the Buck Institute. And he tells me, you guys, meaning me as a physician, me as a health policy expert, is like, you guys got it wrong. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you think cancer is different than Alzheimer's, and Alzheimer's is different than diabetes, and diabetes is different than cardiovascular disease. I'm like, what do you mean? They're completely different. They're different physicians for each, different systems, different organs involved. And he's like, if they were different and independent, and his point is they're all related to aging. They're all symptoms of aging, right? And it's like, if they were independent, why you don't get, Alzheimer's, even if you have the ApoE gene at age 22? Why you don't get your first heart attack at age 25? Why you don't get most of your diabetes at age 17? So he's saying the body gets older, and now, if it's like you drive your car for 250,000 miles, if suddenly you're trying to open the window, doesn't open, you don't say, oh, there's a manufacturing problem. It was used so many times. And by the way, you fix the window, next week or the week after, the engine's going to have a problem. And that's his idea. If you want to solve, so this is what we do today in medicine. We go after diabetes, a pill for a specific receptor or statin for cholesterol. But that same patient is old and was aging in an unhealthy way and is going to have Alzheimer's in 2 years or 5 years, going to have a heart attack or is going to have cancer. Same thing, when the car ages, every month or every other month, you're going to be dealing with an issue. And the best way to preserve this car was to drive it either smoothly or not to drive it. And this is biological age. That's my answer to the unit of measurement to your question. The unit of measurement of health should be your biological age. How old are you from the inside and how healthy are you from the inside? If you're today 60 and I can keep you at age 55 from the inside, we know that I saved you many years of your first Alzheimer's onset, because you're not going to start Alzheimer's at age 50. You're going to start at age 75 or 73. I know that I slowed down your risk of first heart attack or the risk of diabetes, because your muscles still active, you're going to be active. You have the chance to go back and burn and lose the weight and burn the carbs, etc. So the best predictor of the onset of the disease, killing 90% of them. There are other diseases that happen. If you have an autoimmune disease, you have an autoimmune disease. If you have a genetic disease, you have a genetic. But 90% of us today in America, 87% to be very accurate, are dying of 4 diseases: cardiovascular, cancer, diabetes, and Alzheimer's. So all of them happen at later stage in life. The best way to prevent them is to keep you away from aging, because they all are symptoms of aging, definitely accelerated by factors. You can accelerate diabetes and get it at age 30 if you want. If you're super obese and you're stressed and you don't sleep well and and you don't exercise. You can accelerate Alzheimer's by having a genetic predisposition, the ApoE gene, and you can accelerate cancer if you eat very high animal protein and your IGF is always high. And we can talk about all these. You said we're going to drop 1 drop in the bucket today. We're going to drop 20 drops in the bucket today. And but that's my answer is biological aging should be the unit of measurement of health.
So let's go. That's great. And we'll spin 2 questions off of that.
Yeah.
Define health for me.
Well, health is and then again is what is being healthy, but it's the state of body, mind, and soul, all of them being in a good state. And again,
but I think that's the problem, right?
Yeah.
So we're talking about health, and
there's no norm on also on mind. I mean, you can define it a little bit more physically by some measurements, and again, this is where the biological health, but how to define being healthy mentally, there's no benchmark, and you get then into
well, I think that's where we have a problem, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody defines themselves and says, I'm healthy. I take a statin, I take a blood pressure medication. My doctor says I'm healthy. So if we're going to try and improve health and longevity, we actually have to be able to define those terms. And we have struggles in defining those terms, especially health. And health is not a static place, right?
I know.
It's a continuum, and it's.
I know, but let me answer. I understand what you're saying. Let's go back to the car example, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you tell me, is your car going to drive with you and I are driving now? We're going to drive. We're going to have a fun trip from New York to New Jersey, right? And then your question is like, do you know if your car is healthy? Is it going to put us in trouble? I cannot today tell you exactly if today is going to happen, if you're like fully healthy today yet. So that's me answering. But if I ask you, how long did you drive this car? And you say, well, it's brand new. I just drove it for 3,000 miles. I would bet this. Now I'm talking from the payer's perspective, from the societal prevention and helping people, adding life to life, adding healthy life to life. I can bet with you that it will get us there safely. Now, if you tell me, well, it's a 1997 old Chevrolet and it has 280,000, I'll be like, shit, maybe we're gonna be in trouble. So I understand that in a snapshot today, whether you're healthy or not, we need to do a better job defining mental health and well-being, and whether you're feeling healthy and your true health metrics, physical health metrics. But in general, I know I did you a good service if your age is today 60 and I can help you go back biologically to an age of 50. I know I did a great service for you when it comes to what you can die for. Maybe mentally you're still upset or depressed because you have a depression and you have things happening in your life. But I know biologically, on cancer, on diabetes, on Alzheimer's, and cardiovascular, probably I did you the best service we can do to keep you away from them.
I got you. Doesn't answer my question, but I got you. But I think that's the big issue.
Your question. There's no answer to your question. It's a snapshot of health, which we don't have today. We're not fully equipped to say, are you in a state of mind of optimal health? We don't know, and it's a very subjective part of it, by the way.
But we don't have that. We don't have that definition, though. See, we're using health to define health.
But I'm agreeing with
that,
you,
right? So
I'm agreeing with you. I say today we don't know, but what we're sure of is that I can keep you healthier in the long term if I have you younger, because your long term is going to be defined. Small portion of it on whether you're depressed or not today, but a big portion of it is when you're 75, your body is prone to the cancer and the diabetes and the Alzheimer's. And so I know that I can get you in a better state if you're biologically younger, but I don't know whether today, how to measure your health today on a snapshot and tell you exactly where you are versus your optimal potential.
Okay. So then answer this question. Maybe this would be a better way to get to the answer I'm looking for. You're saying, hey, the unit should be biologic age, right? That's your unit. We don't know what health is. We don't have a good definition of it. But if you're biologically younger when you're older, then you're in a better state of whatever health is.
Yes.
Maybe,
because you 20 years ago, you were in a better your body was better, it was younger, you had better defense against the onset of a chronic disease. You might tell me I was depressed 20 years ago. I'm not saying you were not, but you're not going to die out of depression, most probably. This is where the 10% is. The 90%, you have 90% chance of dying of 4 diseases. The biggest reason for you to get that, you get Alzheimer's is going to be aging. Now you can tell me, well, if I eat unhealthy, these are explanations. If I was depressed, if I have leaky gut, I agree with all of that. But these are contributing factors and accelerating factors. They will never drive Alzheimer's at age 25. What's going to drive Alzheimer's is going to be aging. Same for cancer, same for diabetes, So your body was more equipped 10 years ago to deal or prevent or correct. You have more stem cells. You had better way to do autophagy. Your muscle your metabolic rate was higher, so you can get rid of fat faster. This is the diabetes predisposition. So you were a better self-healer 10 years ago.
Oh, I'm not arguing with you. I agree with those things.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to narrow down a couple of things. So what are the criteria to measure biologic age? So if you're saying, hey, if your biologic age is the unit, what are the criteria that we're using to say this
is part of what we're advocating for today. There's several tests, but none of them is accepted as gold standard, right? So if you ask me, my passion is really I have 2 passions in life, is to help policymaking do more prevention through identifying the unit of measurement of health, and maybe it should be biological aging plus something on the mental health. We agree that should be there, but we don't have a test, but at least start somewhere. And then the second passion is how can we slow down biological age so that I keep you healthier longer? Mm-hmm. This is a statement that I would support big time. If I slow down your biological age, I know I'm going to help you live a little bit healthier longer. That's because a younger you is a better performer, has still more stem cells to rejuvenate, to fix, to heal, to prevent, and all that you and I talked about. So how to measure biological age? There are multiple tests. You have the Horvath scores and other scores that look at DNA methylation. You have biological ages now, metabolic age that are emerging. Morgan Levin has now 3 articles on how to measure age, from just a blood draw. So what the government has invested for 20 years now in a project called the NHANE study. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Yep.
So they're observing people now. They crossed 20 years, and it's over, I think, 9,000 individuals. So there's enough data in the pool, and they were doing blood draw every year, and so you have enough big data now to go and build. Okay, if you have this level of CRP in these several thousand people, this subsection developed cancer, this subsection developed Alzheimer's, this subsection died. So Morgan Levin, big biostatistician, put all this together and came up with a regression formula. She identified what in the blood correlates the most with which disease. And it was CRP, it was total cholesterol, it was a blood glucose, I think HbA1c, phosphatase alkaline, and albumin. Plus you add to that your chronological age and your BMI. These 7 factors, she has a formula now that is being approved by Yale and USC, and now is circulating into multiple labs and multiple companies that want to measure biological age, because it's the only one that is based on a true longitudinal study. Unfortunately, nobody has enough money to follow hundreds of thousands of people for 40 years to be able to build that. But it happens that the U.S. government did it at least for 20 years with the NHANE study. And this is a test that we believe in. It's the only one based on as close as possible for longitudinal study. So there's no gold standard. There's multiple tests floating around, whether it's DNA methylation or metabolic measurements. But this is where I think the NIH and other funders should put a lot of money to say, okay, and maybe it's an aggregate of tests, right? Maybe it's a machine learning you put behind those, and you learn with time, or you do a composite score, and then it helps you get an average of averages and tells a person. And by the way, it's not about the accuracy as much as the movement, right? If biological test says if you're 60 and it's showing you're 50, I mean, if you in absolute terms you're 51, that's not going to matter much as next time I measure it for you is the same average mistake fluctuating around the same average. This is all what I need to know, so that I know, am I doing you a favor by slowing down your biological age or not? And this is where the exciting part is how can we slow down somebody's biological age or reverse it? That's the big golden question as well.
Yeah, and I think when all those things are being taken into consideration, I think there's one big factor I don't often think gets taken into consideration. That's the state of the person. So are they operating from a homeostatic state? Or are they operating from an allostatic state? We make this assumption that when we look at labs that everybody's operating from homeostasis, and the physiology works differently when we're in homeostasis than we're in allostasis. And so we're doing these things saying, hey, this is CRP is high and that's a problem, that's bad. Well, wait a minute. When we look at a lab value, we have to determine, is the lab value normal and appropriate, normal and inappropriate given my client, right? Abnormal and appropriate, or abnormal and inappropriate, right? So there's some complexity here.
No,
but
we
I
agree.
think
I mean, you could be a post infection and have it high. We agree with that. This is why we said there's no gold standard, because these things haven't all been covered. And this is why we're saying it's important to always measure it with time so that you get the average of averages rather than a snapshot.
Yeah, looking at trends and looking at the rest of it.
Exactly.
It's one of the reasons that I talk on the podcast a lot. You can't look at lab values out of context. You have to look at lab values in context with what else is going on, whether there's stressors, what's their diet, what's their lifestyle, what's their supplementation, what's their medication. So those are all things that are important versus, hey, we're going to measure 2 or 3 metrics out of context. That may not really give us the understanding that we need. But let's dig into a little bit more, because we talk about longevity, right? And I think that definition is, everybody understands, longevity is how long you live, right? So that's the duration. But there's 2 topics or 3 things: lifespan, health span, and disease span, right? These 3 things. Can you talk on each of those a little bit? Because I think most people have heard health span. I don't think that many people have heard, I mean, most people have heard their lifespan. Most people haven't heard the term health span. And what's changing with health span that's really so concerning?
Yeah, I remember when I was a professor at the Buck Institute, we went and we did a survey. We wanted to see what is the best mission statement we can have related to aging and how to inspire people. And we went and surveyed people if they want to live long. And guess what? 60% said no. This was back in 2011, 2012. And we were shocked. Like, how come? And when you ask the second question, because when I say, hey, do you want to live longer? You're thinking about your father, or you're thinking about your grandmother who's suffering from a chronic disease, and that's the disease span, right? They didn't want to live sick long. Now, when you ask them, wait a second, do you want to live health long? So 60% said no to living a longer life. But then when you ask them if they want to live a healthy long life, and then the chart flips and more people want to do that. And this explains a little bit the notion of health span and disease span. I mean, today we're doing worse. I mean, we're spending $4 trillion. We didn't increase lifespan. Actually, the U.S. population just lost 0.4 years on our longevity. So we're spending a lot more. We have a lot of, every day you hear about new discovery. All in all, we're living shorter and sicker. So that's the absolute, worst case scenario. But you want to live longer and you want to live healthy longer. That's the notion of health span. Ideally, the society we want to build, the healthcare system we want to build, the healthcare system we want to build is you live healthy as long as possible, and then you shorten the period of time where you're sick up until you die. This works for us on the quality of life. This works for payers and insurance and the government, because they wouldn't have to spend a lot of money on caring for us. And this is where the science of healthy longevity, of health span, is coming from. How can I keep you healthier longer? And by the way, it's keeping you biologically younger is the best way you can do that.
Yeah, well, I think that's key. And 3-4 decades ago, people lived pretty healthy, and then they had the last 10 years of their life they were sick. And today we've got people, starting medications very, very early in life. And people can argue, well, I'm healthy, I just take 3 medications. My definition of health is a little bit where, when we're talking about health, this is you're able to self-manage, adapt, and function and thrive in your environment without all the additional support. So if you say, hey, I'm healthy, but I got to take these medications, then I don't think you're optimally healthy, right? So there's a scale there. But the problem with, and the cost now occurs because we're sick for so long. And the other problem is people don't realize that that's not health. We're teaching people today that if these drugs will keep you healthy. If they're not keeping you healthy, they're managing your signs and symptoms, they're managing your Ds, they're helping you be more productive, but that isn't truly health and well-being. So if we're talking about longevity, we're talking about health span. There's a big discussion about food. Some people would say, well, one of the problems is we eat too much and we eat too much crap. That's one of the reasons we got health problems. And I would definitely agree with that. But especially in the world of functional medicine, this world that I live in, there's a lot of discussion about dieting. There's a lot of discussion about which type of diet is best. There's discussions and arguments over time-restricted eating, fasting. Are they the same thing? Are they different? And then your company has this other process, right? In regard to fasting. So let's get into that a little bit. What are from a nutrition standpoint, let's start there. Because a lot of the people that are listening to this podcast are people who have struggling currently right now with health issues and thyroid issues. We've done this in healthcare in the functional medicine space. We've circled the wagons and shot in. We've said, hey, the carnivore diet's best and the vegetarian's bad. Vegetarian's good and paleo's bad, right? We circled the wagons and shot in, but there's some foundational things that really types of foods that really accelerate our level of inflammation and our aging process. What foods are probably the most problematic foods we're putting into our body? And if you had to simplify just nutrition itself and what to eat, what would be your simple answers?
Yeah, so I'll segment your answer into three buckets. First, you said to live longer, what to do, and diet is important. Number two, you talked fasting. Number three, you talk about food ingredients, and I'll answer each one sequentially. The first, just to help people, we believe there are 5 pillars for longevity and aging. And the pillar number 1 is nutrition. Then you have diet and exercise. Then you have stress. You have sleep, and you have the 5th one is happiness, purposefulness, social capital, giving and receiving love, the emotional state, if you want. And by the way, we don't know which one. The ranking the most impactful is between nutrition and between the emotional and social capital one, by the way. So and you're right, there's a lot of confusion out there. What we're different with our company and myself, I'm going to give you answers where there's randomized clinical trials, and where there's none, I will say that we work only with science, and that's critical for us. So I'll tell you what science have shown, and I'll tell you where there are gray areas. We actually, the founder of L-Nutra is Professor Walter Longo, and I don't know if you know Walter,
Absolutely.
one of the biggest longevity experts, and his book, The Longevity Diet. He follows a lot of centenarians around the world. A lot of people who live beyond 100, the 117, the 113, the 105, and trying to find the commonality between them, right? Because they're living proof of the outcome that you're looking for. And by the way, many of them don't have a healthy diet. I know we talk about the blue zone and the commonalities, and we'll talk about that. But a lot of them, what you find is they're living in their own village with their family. They're happy. They're smoking and talking to him. They've been smoking for years. They've been eating, they've been eating animal meats for you. Like the diet is so important, but we believe competing with diet is directly that people are positive, they're happy, they're living with their niche, with their family, and they have a serene, happy daily life, and not joyful moment, but a happy, serene life. And competing with that is nutrition, because nutrition is the only product that you put in your body every day, since the day you're born to the day you die. There's no product except for air that you put in your body every day, multiple times a day. So it must have the biggest impact on a lot of things in your life, not just your age, but your mood, your sleep, and everything. So this is why our company, L-Nutra, Longevity Through Nutrition, our biggest focus is nutrition. How can we find, and this is our slogan, nutrition for longevity, how can we find what humans should eat if they're healthy to stay healthy long, and if they're sick? We have our company has two big business units. The other business unit is a medical one. How can we use food as medicine? And everyone uses this word also left and right. And I haven't seen any food that you can eat today to reverse cancer or Alzheimer's, but this is what we look for. And we've been doing 20 years of research with big grants from NIH and multiple universities and investors to really find food as medicine, not because it's low gluten, therefore I don't intoxicate you. That's easy. A lot of companies say food is medicine. I'm low carb, low gluten, low and organic. Yeah, this is, you're not killing me, and every company should be like that. But show me that you can reverse like medicine a health condition. This is what separates our company with all that. But this requires randomized clinical trial to be able to generate these strong claims. And this is what we look at every day. And so what has been that? What was our discovery, and what has been the cornerstone of us impacting longevity and health condition? It's fasting, actually. So Dr. Longo, Professor Walter Longo, and you can read the longevity diet book, Amazon bestseller for 2018. A lot of his he's the head of the Longevity Institute at USC, and a lot of 25 years ago, his focus had to bring food as medicine and how to bring the food that can help people live long. He discovered that fasting was a major crisis, not a calorie deficit. Every low-calorie diet gives you a calorie deficit, but fasting was a completely different level of intervention. The stress imposed by fasting is such a gap of calories that it acts more as a stress on the body. When you bring a stress to the body goes into a full physiological and metabolical and cellular restructuring. And he started studying what happens if you fast for a few hours, if you fast for 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and 5 days. All of this is, going down from a one cell to fleas to mice and then to human. And again, we're talking about over $50 million in research and 2 decades of lab trials. And now there are 24 universities who joined the research, Stanford and Mayo Clinic and multiple European universities. So I'm going to give you a little bit why fasting, what does it do, what are the types, and then how it impacts longevity and health conditions. So it's important to, when you think about fasting, and I heard you saying fasting, time restricted eating. Fasting has two big type of fasting, 2 chapters when you talk fasting. Are you fasting less than 2 days? And this is intermittent fasting. Are you fasting more than 2 days? And I know when people hear intermittent fasting, they're thinking 16 hours. That's just one type of intermittent fasting. So less than 2 days, it's called intermittent fasting. More than 2 days, it's called periodic or prolonged fasting. And why is that so? What is that 2 days cutoff? The 2 days cutoff, and again, in the body, nothing, in homeostasis, nothing is set by alarm clock, but plus or minus. So, but the 2 days is, for most people, they have enough reserves. And when you fast, there's enough reserve, whether that's glycogen, which you go first for, whether that's fat, whether that's the liver practicing neoglucogenesis. So I always call them the checking account that you have when you have revenues, the glycogen, the savings account, that's fat, and the credit that you can get from the bank, that's the liver. They can jump in and compensate enough for the first day or two for most people. Now, if you're thin, you don't have a lot of reserve, you have high metabolic rate, and you exercise every morning intensively, you're going to get into, you're going to deplete those much faster than in 2 days. But I'm talking on average, it takes a couple of days for people to deplete fast the reserve. They wouldn't be depleted by 2 days, don't get me wrong, but the speed of depletion is so high that the body goes to the cells and tells them it's going to be a crisis. I cannot feed you from the outside, and I'm going fast through my reserve. You got to start practicing autophagy. You got to start looking inside of your cells, finding debris and organelles and things that you can switch to optimize your performance, but also to start eating from your inside. So that's a response of crisis. That's not a response to Mediterranean diet or to just a low-calorie diet. It's the speed of the crisis that gets you into a cellular involvement. And when you involve cells, which again happens for most people after 2 days, we're going to talk about it because most people think they're getting autophagy at 16 hours of TRE, and that's wrong. That's one of the biggest misinformation in fasting. So once you go beyond 2 days and you're having your cells involved and you're losing a lot of weight because so the beauty about periodic fasting is you're losing the weight, so you have a lot of metabolic benefits. At the same time, you're involving your cells, so you start having cellular benefits. When the cells rejuvenate, you're touching your biological age and you're losing weight. So you're optimizing your biological age, and that could be used for a longevity practice. And if you have health conditions, I'm happy to talk more about therapeutic fasting, but this is where you start using fasting to intervene on optimizing the management of a chronic disease. And this is what brought me to this company. This is why I feel we're sitting on a major gold mine of how to bring longevity fasting and therapeutic fasting to the world. Before I go there, I'm going to go back to intermittent fasting because probably most of your listeners say, wait a second, this is new. We never thought intermittent fasting is up to 2 days. What you're talking autophagy doesn't happen before 2 days. So let me clarify all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Under intermittent fasting, you have I'm going to go from the shortest period to the longest period. The shortest is, definition is circadian fasting, or 12 hours. Then, daylight, you follow the daylight cycle, and Sachin Panda is one of the biggest experts in the world and studying time restricted eating that is basically following day and night, cycles, and we call it circadian fasting, 12 hours. And by the way, when you talk to centenarians, most of them practice that, not by purpose, but just by default. They don't snack late at night. They don't watch late TV. They're used to, by ritual, to sleep, eat at 6, 7, then they sleep around 9. They probably take a little bit of walk in the village or around the house, and they just sleep, early, and then they wake up the next day with the sun at 6, 7. So it's really a 12-hour fasting cycle that we see a lot of commonality with in the centenarians. And by the way, people talk about the 2016 Nobel Prize in Medicine, which was on autophagy, but they missed the 2017 Nobel Prize in Medicine, which was on the biological clock of every organ of the body. It's not about just eating or not and resting the brain when you sleep. It's every organ in our body needs that cycle of, I've been working during the day, let me rejuvenate and fix and repair during the night. It's just not the muscle and the brain, but every organ. And that was the Nobel Prize of Medicine 2017. So circadian fasting is the 12 hours. Then you go longer, you skip breakfast, is what most people do when they practice intermittent fasting. They skip breakfast and they prolong the period to eat the next meal to lunch. And this is what gives you the 16-hour. And if you push it a little bit further, the 18-hour fast. Why intermittent fasting, or 16/8? There's actually close to 10% of Americans, the latest statistics from the International Food Council shows that 10% of Americans are practicing or have practiced or have interest in intermittent fasting. That's major. That's the number one diet between 2019 and 2021, by the way. Last year it dropped to clean eating and calorie counting, but most actually intermittent fasters do that at the same time. And why it took off very fast around the world, for two main reasons. Number one is easy to implement. A lot of us in the morning are busy or going to work, or by default we don't eat. And number two, it showed a lot of benefits when it comes to body weight and body in the early days, and metabolism. And the latest science is showing that it's not perfect, and I'll talk about that. You don't lose a lot of weight from it, and this is because a lot of people either binge eat right after the 16 hours, or they're still eating late at night. And what we're saying is, even if you skip breakfast and you delay lunch, eating late at night is even worse than skipping breakfast. So this is big information today. Two articles in the Journal of American College of Cardiology, they're showing that actually longevity is potentially, cardiovascular disease are impacted negatively by intermittent fasting in the morning, but these are not randomized clinical trials. These are observational, and one of them comes from Spain. And the tradition there, you stay late, you enjoy, it's a social country, and you eat late at night. And even if you skip breakfast, eating late at night is showing to be much worse that the intermittent fasting cannot compensate for.
Okay, so let me interrupt you for a minute, because we're going to be short on time, because you and I we could talk for days, and I know we got limited time. So things that my listeners are going to want to understand is there's a discussion or an argument in the world, in thyroid world, that you should not do any fasting if you already have a thyroid problem. What's your experience, or what have you seen in the literature, whether it's problematic or not problematic for somebody who's got a hypothyroid condition to do intermittent or prolonged fasting?
Well, I haven't seen any clinical trial on it, so I wouldn't, as this is what I promised you, is I would say I don't know when I don't know. So I haven't seen any randomized clinical trial on intermittent fasting for thyroid and or prolonged fasting for it. What I can answer is some just anecdotal data. What we do at L-Nutra is we just to close intermittent fasting, go to prolonged fasting. Again, a lot of people practice intermittent fasting thinking it gets to autophagy. For most people, it does not. Just let me be as blunt, as clear as possible. If you skip breakfast, you're not in a crisis. You have plenty of fat, you have plenty of glycogen, you have your liver is super healthy. You're not going to be in crisis and do autophagy. So let us make that very clear. So when you jump to prolonged fasting, that's the value of prolonged fasting. Get into deeper autophagy, you lose more weight, and therefore you induce a bigger rejuvenation and metabolic reset in the body. Now, why we exist as a company, we were a water fasting company, is the National Institute of Health gave us millions of dollars to help people do prolonged fasting. When you tell people fast for, and ideally our studies are showing you should fast between 4 and 5 days, not on water. I'm not here to recommend water fasting. We used to do that. We used to be a water fasting research company, but people cannot do 4 to 5 days. It's so difficult. It's risky for many, and it has side effects. When you bankrupt the body for 5 days, it gets some positive activity on so many levels, but it comes at a cost. So the National Institute of Health, and again now 18 universities with us, have developed and researched the fasting mimicking nutrition, meaning can you feed somebody and keep them in a fasting mode? And that's a big oxymoron. How am I feeding someone and keeping them in a fasting mode? And basically, it's using this secret formulation that has 77 ingredients to nourish your body, but when you get to the cell, when the nutrients get to the cell, and as you know, carbs and protein get processed through the PKA and the RAS and the TOR pathway, we don't stimulate these pathways enough for the cell to feel satisfied. That's the secret of fasting with food. That's the secret of the fasting mimicking diet, is your body knows that you're eating through two mechanisms. The endocrine mechanism, when you spike insulin as a response to carb ingestion. So our fasting mimicking nutrition or fasting mimicking diet does not spike insulin as a response when you eat it. And the IGF as a response to a spike of IGF as a response to ingesting proteins. Also, our food is designed not to spike IGF, which is an insulin-like growth factor. So when you eat the fasting mimicking nutrition, we call it Prolon, Prolon. When you eat Prolon, it's only a 5 days program. You get the food delivered to you and you eat it, and then insulin and IGF are not spiking. So at the endocrine level, you're not realizing there's food. And then when the nutrients get to the cells, the three cellular recognition of nutrients, the TOR pathway, which responds mainly to IGF and protein, and the PK and the RAS are not stimulated enough for the cell to go off protectionist mode of fasting. And this is why we were called the fasting mimicking diet. We have 327 filed patents on it, over 40 issued. And now we study the fasting mimicking diet for longevity, because you're inducing the biological rejuvenation of 5 days of fasting that we talked about in autophagy. And we study it also as a therapeutic intervention. And we started getting the results for people with health conditions like diabetes, like cancer, like Alzheimer's, and autoimmune disease. So this is what I want to tie it back to your question. We only have anecdotal data on Hashimoto and patients with their doctors, mainly functional medicine doctors, talking about it. We never done a randomized clinical trial on a fasting mimicking diet and hypothyroidism. So I don't have an answer there. I just have some anecdotal data on it. What I can tell you is we've studied on autoimmune disease fasting. If you read the old books of medicine, fasting was part of treating autoimmune diseases. And what I will do here, I will just explain how and leave it there, because again, there's not currently a randomized clinical trial on it, but I can tell you how fasting can impact an autoimmune disease. potentially a hypothyroidism, but I don't know. We don't have the data. When you fast, you know, an immune attack on an organ requires active white blood cells, right? And white blood cells need replication, and that increase cytokine, you know, release, which increase temperature. It's like a heated engine. It's like a car driving forward fast and spending gas. Same thing when you're in a state of hyperactive white blood cells that attack an organ. When you fast, the body does not allow that expenditure, that calorie expenditure. So when you fast directly, we see a shutdown, a slowdown of any hyperactivity in cells. Actually, the body responds to fasting by just stopping mitosis, stopping replication of any cell. It's part of saving calories. It's part of not spending calories. It's part of not growing. So we see when we study, especially in mice, we see a quick decrease in the immune attack when you fast. And then the attacked organ, and we have a really good paper in Cell Report on fasting for multiple sclerosis. And the attacked, and we have imagery showing when the attacked organ, when you put the attacked organ into prolonged fasting, at the same time, it's doing autophagy. It's trying to rejuvenate and repair. So you're hitting on both sides. Fasting hits on both sides. You have a decrease in the attack, and you're reducing the cells to repair and rejuvenate in the attacked organ. We have a lot of, and again, anecdotal data, psoriasis and other conditions. We don't have trials, so I cannot claim in here, but that's the mechanism that we studied in our labs and in mice about how fasting can intervene on autoimmune diseases.
So are you familiar with Dr. Navio's work on the cell danger response?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So when you're thinking about somebody who's got chronic illness, are you thinking they're operating from that cell danger response already? Or are you thinking they're already in homeostasis and you're trying to use a fasting mimicking diet to trigger a cell danger response? I would look at it like these are people that are already in a cell danger response, right? So,
yeah, but in a cell damage and danger response, right? So they've been attacked by an immune cell. There's inflammation around them, and there's multiple signs coming around them. Once you decrease that inflammation, once you decrease the attack, and you allow the cell to transition back under a positive protection stress of fasting, the cells goes back and say, okay, let me now figure out how to go. I got the hammer that was hitting me is off, and now let me go back from danger to homeostatic by repairing and using. And fasting at least takes the trigger off and helps them get into that positive reparation mode.
Well, yeah, I agree with the concept and the idea, because when I'm looking at clients and helping clients, I'm always kind of looking through that window of the cell danger response. And my perception of thyroid physiology is we're looking at it as a gland disorder. I'm telling you, it's a cell disorder first.
Yes.
Cells in danger want to downregulate their metabolism. They're turning off the manufacturing process. They're turning up the inflammatory cell defense mechanisms. Their downregulation of thyroid hormone actually helps accentuate autophagy. So these things really, this is all part of that cell stress, cell danger response. So when we're talking about is fasting good or bad, people say, well, you're starving your client. They're already in danger mode. Well, if a person already has a level of tissue hypothyroidism, they're already in a state of cell danger response, they're not bringing nutrients in. That's one of the reasons they have a level of insulin resistance.
But science solved that, right? Science solved that. We were a water fasting company, and yes, you're right. Everything that fasting positive it brings, it has negatives because it's a depletion as well. And this is why we started as a National Institute of Health project. NIH gave the first, millions, and we're talking, I don't want to name it, but there's over 48 millions that just went into that because we created a Nourish Fast for the first time, which solves what you're talking about. Yes, you should not starve patients for long hours, and that's not healthy for everyone. And this is why the nutrients are there, is how can we tip the balance, keep autophagy, keep the rejuvenation, keep the positive protection signal while you're nourishing, because guess what? You need nourishment to accelerate all this process as well. Even if you want to, anything that cell does needs calories at the end of the day. And if there's depletion, there's depletion. And this is why we exist. We're a spinoff from University of Southern California and sponsored by the NIH. It came from the need of science to nourish while you fast. And by the way, your brain needs to function. Forget about thyroid. When you're fasting, your brain needs calories, your heart needs to pump, your kidney needs to work. It's like a company. When you put a company at zero revenue, there's on the positive side, the CEO will structure, will optimize, will cut every every unnecessary expenditure, and will try to fix everything going wrong. That's the positive healing impact of fasting. But that same CEO cannot afford paying his employees and is going to lose the best ones first. That same CEO cannot order supply for next month and is not going to have good sales next month. The fasting mimicking diet gives that CEO the money he needs while keeping the positive pressure of rejuvenation. And this is what you want. This is what you want to practice to win on both sides.
Yeah. So I think we're on the same team here, the idea. And I think for the client, for the people who are listening, I think if I simplify this all down, what this fasting mimicking diet, we didn't get that far into, we only had an hour to get into it, but what the fasting mimicking diet is going to allow you to have the nutrition that you need to still run the systems without being inhibitory and having you take all this stuff, have this extra stuff that has to go, hey, I can't use some of this stuff, and pushing this stuff into storage. You got able to, somehow these guys have figured out how to still support the cell, still allow it to operate from its adaptive danger physiology to address the root cause or the root issue so it can get itself back.
This is what took us 25 years of research in top universities and labs around the world. We wanted to, for the first time, to practice a nourished fasting, not a starvation fasting. How can we keep the positive signs of fasting on the cell so the cells are not knowing that they're eating, but they're still getting some nourishment to function and operate and do their best? Yeah. And that equilibrium, and it's a 77 ingredient diet, so it gives you, it's a plant-based, healthy. There's no artificials. There's nothing artificial. It's actually a premium ingredients, macadamia based and pecan and other ingredients. It's all plant-based, really healthy, 5 days. But it took 2 decades to figure out, how can I give you the macros you need? How can I give you the minerals, the vitamins, and each one and together not interfere with your autophagy, rejuvenation, positive stress on the cells while giving you the nutrients to operate.
Well, I know we're up against a hard stop. I've got about 10 more of the 10 questions I have. So maybe we can get you back on and have a longer discussion, get into the difference between the fasting mimicking diet, elemental diet, some of these other things that are out there, and maybe talk about insulin and insulin spikes and cellular physiology. So that may be a reason to get you back sometime in the future. So if we've piqued an interest in somebody and trying to figure out, they're going, all right, now I need more information about this fasting mimicking thing, where do they go? Where do they get more information on this?
Yeah. If you love science, go to our company website, L for longevity -Nutra, Nutra.com. We publish there in the science section. We have all our articles, again, over 18 randomized clinical trials published in Cell, Science, and Nature. If you're a physician, if you're or if you're a consumer and you love, or a patient and you love to read science, we have our top articles, again, in Cells, Nature, and Science over there. You can learn more about the corporation there and what is the fasting mimicking diet and how we apply it for longevity. By the way, we're the only company in history to have a patent on promoting human longevity. And we have patents on diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, and autoimmune diseases. And if you want to try, if you're you're curious about trying the 5 days fast with us, the product we have in the market is called Prolon, and you ordered on prolonfast.com, and it's only 5 days. You only need to do it 3 times a year for longevity and for healthy aging. If you have any health condition, then talk to your doctor. We're not here to position the product for any disease. Talk to your doctors and see what's the best regimen if you want to optimize nutrition around your standard of care.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Maybe we'll try and get another one done to finish the conversation.
Yeah, we're launching the first ever diabetes regression and remission program, nutrition base, in end of this year. So you talked about insulin resistance and diabetes. This is one of our passion, and we're launching our first remission program from diabetes. It's going to be the first historical one. end of this year. So happy to talk about it then. And we have already 2 randomized clinical trials behind it.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Antoun, right? I got that right? Is that Dr. Antoun? Thanks for coming on the podcast. For the listeners, check it out. Go learn a little bit more. I'll have to pull my copy of the longevity diet back out because I read that a while ago when it first came out. I'll have to pull it back out and see how we can apply this into what we're doing today, and especially in discussions with the cell danger response. This episode of the podcast is good for anybody, not just, as I say all the time, not just for people who are struggling with thyroid issues. And of course, don't forget the book that I just put out with Dr. Kelly Halderman, The Thyroid Debacle, is out and available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. So go out and get your copy of The Thyroid Debacle. And some of the stuff that we talked about in this discussion is stuff I talk about in The Thyroid Debacle. So everybody have a great day. Dr. Antoun, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and I'll reach out to your people, try and get another visit scheduled. Okay.
Thank you very much.